Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Cordent and today we're going to be talking a little bit about Total War Warhammer 3. So, this is a video that I've been wanting to do for a very long time now. I just never really got the chance for it. And by the way, if my voice sounds a little bit weird and rough, it's because I'm sick. But hopefully it won't be too much of an issue. But yeah, I've been meaning to do this video for a long time now. Even if I don't have any other kind of content about Total War in the channel, this is my first video talking about Total War in the channel. Maybe I'll do some more depending on the reception as well. But it is a game that I've been playing on and off for some time now, and I really enjoy. I enjoy it so much to the point that I actually want to make a video talking about the game. And, you know, I can introduce this type of game, or this game in particular, to you guys. If you don't know Total War, maybe you can get to know it here. If you know it, you can get my opinion on it if you are interested. So, just to give you guys some brief context and background on, you know, my gaming history and my experience with strategy games and Total War games. I first heard about Total War games when the first Total War Shogun came out. This was, I checked on the wiki before I started the video, this was in June 2000. So 25 years ago, that game came out. Yeah, so I was a youngling then. Now I'm just a tired old man filled with regret and all that. But yeah, at that time, I played a lot of RTS games. So I loved stuff like Age of Empires. My first experience with RTS games was with Age of Empires 1. It came in a demo CD for a PC magazine that my father bought me at the time. And I played the hell out of that demo, just converting people with a priest from the other side of a settlement wall. Just a lot of good time spent playing that game. And ever since then, I played a lot of RTS games, and for a period of my life, the RTS genre was my favorite style of game to play. So stuff like Age of Empires 1, Age of Empires 2, StarCraft 1 and 2, Warcraft. Then later we also got the Warhammer 40k Dawn of War games, and a bunch of other games that I also played a lot, that honestly I don't even remember the name right now. The ones that had like the different ages, not just Age of Empires, but there were other ones that started like on the Stone Age and then went all the way into like computer and space age. I played the hell out of those games, but then at a certain point, I'm sure you guys are aware, the RTS genre kind of died off. So for a long time now, there haven't really been a lot of RTS games coming out, or at least not a lot of very successful ones. So, but yeah, that's my background in terms of RTS and strategy. That's what I was playing at the time. And when Total War came out, I thought, oh, it's another RTS game. I'm gonna try it out and see if I like it, because I should. And I tried it out, Total War Shogun, and I just did not like the game at all. I could not get into the combat of the game. I didn't really understand how the game played out, because in my mind, it was gonna play out similarly to Age of Empires and StarCraft and stuff like that. It's really not the case. And then you also have the entire, you know, the whole campaign aspect of the game, which I was not accustomed to at all. So I was expecting something, and maybe this is what ruined it for me, my expectations. I was expecting something, and it just did not match in the slightest way. So for a very long time, I ignored every kind of Total War game that came out, and I kind of just brushed them off as, oh, that sucks. I don't like that type of game, so I'm not going to play it. So a lot of Total War games came out, but then Total War Warhammer came out, which was something different from what they had done, because most Total War games are historic Total War games. You have stuff like, you know, Attila the Hun, you had medieval, you had the Empire, you had Napoleon, the Pharaoh, Rome, stuff like that. So all historical games. But then when Warhammer came out, it's a different type of game, right? It's a fantasy world. And in case you don't know, I'm a big Warhammer fan. It actually also started with RTS games, because my love for Warhammer and my first introduction to Warhammer was in the RTS games that came out for it in the Dawn of War series. So you had Warhammer 40k Dawn of War, then you had the expansions, then you had stuff like Dark Crusade, there was one with the Battle Sister chapter as well, then you had Warhammer 40k Dawn of War 2 and 3, and I liked those games a lot. The third one not so much, but the first one and the second one I liked a lot. So when I saw Total War Warhammer, I was like, okay, I'm gonna try this again, because all this time that I've not been playing Total War games, I was gonna say Warhammer, but not at the time, I've always felt like, even though I could not get into it, this was exactly the type of game that I would really enjoy. I always had that feeling, but it never really clicked for me. So I tried once again Total War Warhammer, same experience, hated it. I picked it up, I think, on like a Humble Bundle, Total War Warhammer 1, and I just did not enjoy it. I did not like or know the campaign part of the game. I could not understand the combat. So once again, I dropped the Total War style for many years, didn't touch it. Second game came out, I didn't care. Third game came out, I didn't care. I mean, it was always in the back of my mind that I would like to try out those games, or I would like to like those games, if that makes sense, but I didn't touch them. But some years after this game came out, I said to myself, I am gonna give this another go, because again, this really feels like the type of game that I would enjoy. And I kind of forced myself a little bit to try and get into, you know, the mechanics of the game. And let me tell you, once they actually clicked, this has become like my go-to game. Every time I have some free time and I want to play something, Total War Warhammer 3 is the game that I play. And I like this game so much that, like I said before, I don't have any other content for it in the channel yet. I might get some more, but I want to make this video to talk a little bit about it and, you know, go over some of the things I like about the game, introduce this game to you guys in case you don't know it, and just, you know, I like talking about it, so I'm going to talk about the game. That's basically it. So with this entire context in mind, I'm going to reiterate that Total War games do not play like your typical RTS game. So I'm going to use again the same example like Age of Empires and StarCraft, because these are the more well-known ones. This game has a whole different aspect to it, which is the campaign map and movement in the campaign. And even in terms of fighting the actual battles, it plays out very differently. So your typical RTS game, you control your units individually. You can group them up into groups of multiple units and stuff like that, but you can micro them one by one. In this game, you don't get that. In this game, you control huge armies. Your units are not one unit. I mean, you can have one unit or one model units, but when we're talking about the more default approach to them, let me see if I can find something here actually. Like for example, let's just look at this unit here. This is a unit. It's Ungor. I'm gonna use something a little bit more relatable.
Empire's blessings.
We have swordsman. Okay, this is a unit. It has a bunch of stats like armor, leadership, speed, melee attack, melee defense, blah blah blah. But it also has entity size or entity or model count. This unit is actually comprised of 120 units. So you don't control one swordsman. You control a whole company of swordsmen, a whole unit of 120 swordsmen. And the same thing applies to many other things in the game, like you have 120 halberdiers, 120 greatswords, 90 handgunners, 60 Reichsguard cavalry, 4 units of mortars. So essentially, you control large numbers of units in the map. And that also changes a lot how you actually play the game, because the game is a lot more about positioning and outmaneuvering your opponents, formations, learning about the strengths and weaknesses of army compositions, not just the actual unit itself, but the entire army composition in itself. Like, I'm gonna give a brief example. Is the enemy army completely composed of infantry then maybe if I have artillery, I'm gonna do very well, because artillery does a lot of AoE damage and it decimates enemy infantry. AoE type of weapons like flamethrowers are gonna work very well. Cavalry to flank, magic, stuff like that. So you want to approach that type of army composition in a certain way, where if the enemy army, for example, is comprised of a lot of ranged units and a lot of artillery, you might want to do something a little bit different. Like you might want some flying units to catch up with the artillery, or maybe some stealth units to outmaneuver the artillery or the ranged units. So there's a lot of strategy involved in how you maneuver in the actual battle, which is very, very fun. But again, it's very different from your typical style of RTS like, you know, Age of Empires and StarCraft. So I think one of the things I want to mention before we actually look into the actual gameplay here is one of the things I love about this game is the amount of content you have and the amount of replayability. I'll explain this a little bit better later, but just know that I think we have like around 100 different ways of playing this game. And what I mean by different ways is we have all of these different races, right, or factions, and inside of each race or faction you also have different lords, and these lords are going to be like your quote-unquote your main character or your main general, and they will change the way that you play the game, because they may have different faction effects or lord effects. The whole faction has its own unique mechanics that play out differently from other factions and other lords. So you basically get a lot of replayability out of this game. So just to show a little bit of how this game plays, I have a campaign that I'm kind of working on. And of course, if you don't know, I'm kind of a sucker for shorty races. So if a game lets me play with dwarves, I'm gonna love that game. And coincidentally, I am playing a campaign with dwarves. So I'm gonna show you guys how the actual game looks like, just so you have some notion of how this plays and, you know, how the gameplay is. We also have a lot of very cool quotes sometimes, which I like a lot. Come on, game. Okay. So right now, this is a campaign that's on turn 26, so it's relatively early campaign. I'm playing with Belagar Ironhammer, which is one of the dwarf lords, and we can get a brief look here at the map. On a you know, kind of a side note, I love the look of the map. I think the map looks really, really good. It's a very beautiful scenery, I think. You have a lot of different types of areas. You have like mountainous areas, you have plains, you have something like a wasteland, you have desert, you have the river, you have wooded areas, you have different climates. There's a whole bunch of things to the actual campaign map, and all those things also play out or also have a meaningful impact in the game. Like, for example, dwarves, they love to make their homes in mountainous climates, right? You can see here on with the green circle, but they're not so much a fan of, for example, a magical forest or even a temperate climate, right? They don't really like this. They prefer the mountains and the depths and all that, which I think is very flavorful. And what we see here basically is, we see the map, again, beautiful. We see different settlements. These are the things that typically we want to control, we want to conquer and hold for ourselves to kind of expand our empire. We can see our own, we can see our little flag over here. We can see others as well, like our allies. Some of them might be devastated or they might be hidden with some secret enemies. And you can also see armies on the map. Like we have an army over here that's from one of my allies, which are also dwarves. And we also see some enemy armies here, for example, that are comprised of greenskins, that are mostly like, you know, orcs and goblins and trolls and whatnot. So you see all of that in the campaign map. And basically, how you play this game is you maneuver with your armies around the map, working on different objectives. And your objectives may vary, but typically you also have, literal objectives here and victory conditions. So for example, I have like these 3 victory conditions that are basically here due to a mod, but in the base game you also have victory conditions. And I have to hold Karakate Peaks, which is a settlement. I have it here. We have to win the following battle. We have to destroy the following faction, stuff like that. Just to give you some, some objectives, something to look forward to and guide you as you play out through the game. Because you can play this game on the actual story campaign. I don't really like that very much, personally. I guess I can talk a little bit about it in a second. Or you can play the game like I am right now, which is in the Immortal Empires mode, which is kind of like a sandbox. So you have different factions throughout the world, and you have different victory conditions, or you might even have an objective of like conquer the entire map. You can do that. It's called domination, where you basically control every single thing on the map. I've never done that. I think that's a very large endeavor, but you can also do it. So, as an example here, our little dwarfs, they start out on this settlement over here, which has actually been lost. I've been attacked by Skaven, and they've taken my settlements here. But this particular faction has a big objective, which is to capture the Karakate Peak settlement, which is a settlement that's very far away, right? So it's over here. And this basically meant that I had to go from my initial settlement, move up. I captured these 2 settlements. I still hold this one that I'm trying to defend. Confederated some allies over here. And then I kind of declared war on a different faction, which were the ogres, taking some of their territory, moved this way over here, made some allies along the way with the other dwarven faction, made some enemies as well from Greenskins and Skaven, but eventually I got over to Karakate Peaks. I sold some of the settlements I had captured before back to Mr. Thorgrim here, which is my ally, in exchange for military alliances, money, and for him to join my wars as well, because those are all things you can do via diplomacy, which I can talk about a little bit as well. And now I'm making my new base of operations around Karakate Peaks, because again, this is a very important settlement for this faction. So, as you can see here, I've conquered the surrounding areas, and I'm trying to conquer more territory from this section here, which is the realm of Skaven. We can even see Skaven corruption here. And these are like my main enemies right now, together with Skarsnik, which is the Greenskin faction also. So this is just to give you some kind of idea of what I'm doing in the campaign and how it's progressing. And I find that the addition of the campaign gameplay, it adds a lot to the enjoyment of the game, because you have to move strategically. You have to make your enemies and start war strategically, because if you start declaring war on everybody around you, you're going to get surrounded and you're going to lose, especially if you're playing on the higher difficulties like I am. So all of that has a strategy to it. Diplomacy also plays out in a very big way in this game. And again, this is one of those things where younger me thought, oh, that sucks. I don't care about diplomacy. I want to kill people. I want to go into fights, right? I want to use my swordsman and my bowman. I don't want bureaucracy. But let me tell you that ever since I started playing this game, I enjoy this a lot. Nothing makes me happier in this game if I am playing with Order faction, because this game basically has 2 types of factions, which are like like the Order factions and the Chaos factions. And the Order factions, they tend to ally themselves with each other more often than Chaos factions. So me being able to work towards my objectives and at the same time help out my friends. Sorry, I had to drink some water. So yeah, while working towards my goals, if I can also help out my friends along the way, man, that makes me feel really, really good. I just really enjoy hiccups, helping out friendly factions. Like, for example, this guy here, which is Thorgrim Grudgebearer, one of my favorite characters in the game as well. My favorite faction, actually. These guys were in a little bit of trouble because they were fighting Skarsnik, this greenskin faction that starts over here. But then they were also declared war upon by the faction over here, which is actually a new faction from a DLC, which is again a greenskin faction, and they were kind of getting pinched from both sides. So I kind of, like I said, I helped them out. We cleared out the entire greenskin faction from over here, Gorbad, and I gave some of the territory back to him so that he could hold himself off a little bit better against the opponents to the north. And that makes me feel really, really good. I enjoy that type of gameplay, making alliances. Not only does it feel good, but it's also a very good strategy move. Because if I have a strong ally, and we can see them here in this light blue, I'm the dark blue. If I have a strong ally above me, this means that I don't really need to worry too much about this northern side, right? Whereas if I had an enemy here, I would constantly be under pressure and I would have to concern myself about the settlements adjacent to their border. And that's especially important because if you are at war, like I am, for example, right now, with this southern faction here, if I have to worry about this side and the northern side, it's going to make my life a whole lot harder. And the same thing, you know, for east and west. So if we can control our flanks and our borders through alliances, it makes the game a lot simpler and a lot easier and a lot more controlled for you. And I think that's a very, very cool aspect to it. So diplomacy is what allows you to do that. So essentially what you can do with a faction is, let me pick something here that I haven't interacted with yet, like Sylvania, for example. Rank 1 Sylvania, okay, that's gonna be fun. You can make a non-aggression pact, you can make a trade agreement, you can request military access, defensive alliances, military alliances. You can request for them to break their own agreements with other factions. You can ask them to join wars, you can ask them for money, you can give them money to improve relations because, you know, they have a certain attitude towards your faction, and this applies to all other factions. You can declare war on them, and you can even trade settlements. So there is a lot, and I do mean a lot, of strategy involved in the diplomacy screen that can make or break a lot of your campaigns. So just gonna briefly go over it. Non-aggression means while you hold this agreement, none of you can declare war on each other, or typically you won't. Trade agreement, you give them money, you receive money back, depending on what you are exporting and importing. Military access means you can walk around their territory without incurring a trespassing penalty. Defensive alliance means if they are declared war by another faction, you can also join the war defending them, and vice versa, they will also help you. And military alliance means if somebody declares war on you, or if you declare war on somebody else, your allies can also decide if they want to join that war or not. So a lot to be said about the diplomacy. I'm not going to go into, you know, great details about this. That's not the point of this video. But diplomacy is a very big fun factor for this game. So yeah, we've kind of walked around. We are progressing towards our objective. And I guess I can show a little bit of the gameplay here because my armies have had their action for the turn. I've moved. I've captured the settlement. Oh, right. We also have a kind of Warcraft 3 type of element because you have your characters like your lords and heroes. They level up. You can give them items. You can level them up with skills and stuff like that. I'm gonna put them over here actually in this guy. And basically you can have, you know, many lords, you can have a number of heroes, stuff like that can help you out throughout your journey. But yeah, so we have that element. we have, I think, done our stuff for the turn. We can, you know, develop our settlements as well with buildings and recruit different units for the army and stuff like that. You are still defending this position with some crappy units. And right now we're simply going to end the turn. So this is our turn. We can only we can act during our turn, and when we end turn, everybody else acts. So we get to see the rest of the world doing stuff. Currently, there are 137 other factions at play. 1 died, 2 died. Our enemies are sending agents towards us, but they are greatly weakened. I killed a lot of their armies already.
Only true vengeance will make me happy.
Are you gonna declare war on me, you bitch? Yep, so this guy right here is declaring war on me. But since I have a military alliance with Karazakarak, which is my dwarf friends, we can call our allies to help. And they joined the war as well. So they can help us out. We can see our friends taking their actions as well. Okay, he's going to reinforce that part of his map because he has enemies over there. And I also requested assistance in dealing with an enemy army to the east. I want to see if he actually goes for it. He didn't. Okay, because I need to kill this guy. Silvani doing stuff. But yeah, you get a feel of how the different factions play out in the map and what they do. We can see armies repositioning, settlements being conquered, stuff like that. We also get notifications of important events, an ambusher and whatnot. Okay, so for example, over here, I have my settlement in this position, which is not very well defended, right? So this is Black Iron Mine. I don't really have a lot of defenses. I only have a couple of units. And we have this full army coming to attack it. So my options right now, since my armies are over here, are to try and go back. Well, I'm probably going to lose this, but I could try and then stop his advances. I did ask this army, or was it this one? I did ask one of my allied armies to go and deal with that. I'm guessing this guy might help me out, depending on what happens. Maybe I can tell him to defend this. Defend that. Okay. This is one of the military alliance perks. You can ask your allies to attack targets, defend targets, or occupy targets to help me out. And just to show some of the actual gameplay, or the combat gameplay, I'm going to ignore that, and I'm going to attack an enemy settlement. So right here we have a minor settlement. We're going to use our faction, or our main army here, to go over there. It is occupied by only the settlement garrison, with a couple of enemies here. In this case, these are Skavens, they're like Ratman. One of my favorite factions as well, by the way. I want to put armor piercing damage on you. We're going to encircle this settlement, because we can also siege a settlement and starve out the defenders. In 9 turns, for example, they would just die out without me having to fight. And I'm even going to reinforce my army here with another army friend. So right now, you see this line over here. This guy's reinforcing my army. I'm going to attack. You actually have a wall. Really? That's annoying. Okay, let's fight this battle. Just so we have a sense of how this plays out. Or actually, honestly, if this is... This might be a little bit of a complex demonstration of the combat. I might actually swap this for something a little bit simpler. Let me see. Yeah, there's gonna be other elements at play here that I don't really want to go into. But basically what's happening here is that this settlement had defenses set up. So you don't just fight the enemy army on the field, you actually fight them behind defensive positions, right? You can see these guys over there, and they can set up defensive towers and blockades and stuff like that. But for the purpose of showing the video here, I'm going to swap for something a little bit simpler. Okay, so I'm actually going to show a little bit of the campaign here as well, because this is a simpler example where you can see a little bit more. I just made a new campaign with the Empire faction. We're talking about the humans here. We start off in this position over here. And we have our initial enemy. This is just like a very basic army to fight. This is turn 1. But it exemplifies what you can actually do on the campaign. So I select my army. I go against the enemy army here.
No peace, just war.
And we get a, you know, a fight UI. We can even scout terrain to see where this fight's going to play out. It's just on the field. It's not on a settlement like we saw before with the Skaven. And over here, I think it's going to be easier for me to exemplify on how the actual gameplay works. We can see our lord, we can see the enemy lord, and we can also see the types of units that we have. So in my case, I have an halberdier, 2 swordsmen, 1 great sword unit, 2 handgunners, 1 cavalry unit, and mortars. And the enemy has a lord, some spearmen, swordsmen, and a crossbowman. So we have the superior army composition here, both in actual composition, but also in terms of unit quality. So we get this pre-fight setting, where it's like deployment phase. And what you do in the deployment phase is you set up your units. So we have all of these, right? And what I talked about before, you don't control a single swordsman unit, right? You control the entire squad, battalion, whatever you want to call it. So you can tell them go there, go there, go there, attack that, but you never control like this part of the entities, you only control the entire thing. So what you do in the deployment phase is set up your army positioning so that when the fight starts, they will be wherever you want them to be. You can also group them up, and I tend to do that. So I can do something like this. I'm gonna get my cavalry as well and my mortars. Then I have my infantry here. So with this army composition, something that's very simple to do, and I won't go into complicated tactics here, there's no point, is just have your frontline infantry, your melee infantry, in the front. You know, front line makes sense. And then you would have your backline, for example, your handgunners, in the backline. So we would stand behind our front line, being safe from the initial encounter or the initial attack from the enemy units. If I had my handgunners in front, they cannot defend themselves very well in melee, and they could very easily just die. Our lord is a powerful entity. Even though he's only a single unit, he is at times even more powerful than an entire squad, depending on how he's leveled up and items and whatnot. So you don't need to fear sending him in front. Depending if it's like a melee lord or a caster lord, because there's also magic in the game. In this case, this is a melee lord, so he can actually be in the front. We want to have our artillery, again, in the back. We don't want this exposed. And our cavalry is very useful to flank. So something I can very easily do here is put my cavalry over here. And we can also just adjust how we want them. If we want them like that or like this, I'll just put them over here. Because my plan right now is I want to try and make their front line come towards mine, which is a better type of front line. And while they're held up with my front line, I'm going to be shooting them with my handgunners, and my artillery is going to soften them up as they come towards me and while they're fighting over here. Then they also have these crossbowmen units, and for those, that's where my cavalry is going to come into play, because I'm going to try and flank them to take them out, so we're not going to get arrows being shot at our front line. Something that I also want to take attention to is that since we're fighting with gunpowder, these missile units fire projectiles that go in a straight line. So line of sight is important. You cannot shoot rifles through your friends. You're gonna kill them. There's friendly fire. So you need to have a firing angle. So right now I could probably shoot all the way up to here and above. But when the enemies engage, I cannot shoot this close. So high ground helps out, and kind of being on the flank also helps out, because then I can outmaneuver them and shoot them from the side. So I could even do something like this here with the handgunners, and the same thing kind of on this side here, and have my front line like that. Okay, so let's stop talking, and our setup is done. We're gonna start the battle. I'm gonna move my cavalry over there. We can also speed up the game however we want. My artillery, shoot the swordsman. We can see the pew pew getting dropped over there. My horses are gonna flank. And again, we have the superiority here. They have to come to us, because we can just shoot them, bombard them with artillery, so they have to move towards us. We're not being very accurate, because in this difficulty setting the enemies actually try to dodge artillery projectiles. But not to worry. Shoot there. Okay, and once these crossbowmen start lagging behind, I'm gonna go for them. My handguns are starting to shoot. They're shooting my cavalry, that's fine. I'm just waiting for these guys to get out of there, basically.
Ready for war!
Okay, they left. Let's go for the archers. I can have my lord deal with their lord. We can also buff our units here. Okay, so now our line of sight is kind of compromised, so we can even do this. Just outmaneuver them. Look at my horses! Yeah, so archer units versus cavalry are not gonna have a good time. So now we can shoot them from that side and shoot them from this side. And we can even aim carefully with the artillery, maybe, and not hit my own units. Okay, they routed because they lost their morale. We can still kill them if we want. Mortars. Pew. You can stop shooting, and victory is ours. We're killing that lord over there. I always love watching the effects. It is just very satisfying. But yeah, this is like the initial fight for this faction, so it's not very complicated. But I think it goes to show, you know, how the actual combat gameplay plays out. So again, it's not like your typical RTS. It's much more about positioning, outmaneuvering, flanking, making sure you have line of sight, making good use of cavalry and artillery. Okay. You can even save the replay if you're particularly proud of your battle, and you can just see it again later, which I find cool. I have saved a few in my time because I enjoy rewatching it. We get the summary. We killed a lot, lost very few, but don't worry about losses, because our armies can and will replenish. That's another mechanic that I'm not going to go into, but just know that units will replenish over time. You know, we got some money, we got some experience, we got some prestige, which is part of the mechanic of this particular faction. And I can even just do replenishment straight up to heal my characters, or I can just get some more gold, or even just get some more experience, whatever you prefer. Okay, so enemy army defeated. And as long as we have movement, we can continue acting, right? This is not like one action per turn type of game. As long as you can move, you can attack, like we did over here. We can besiege a settlement, we could attack another army, we can do whatever we want. So, leveled up, we get the skill tree. Again, we can pick whatever we want. We also have tech trees, which I won't go too much into right now, but these are like pretty standard in this type of game, like if you've played Civilization, for example, which has some similarities to the campaign part of the game, right? You know, you have stuff that buffs infantry, that buffs missiles, cavalry, it might buff trade and industry, some other things like the diplomatic relationships. All these things you can pick and choose whatever you prefer. And something I forgot to mention. Not only do you have your manual fights, you can also auto-resolve. So if you really like the campaign aspect of the game, but you don't enjoy the actual fighting, you can just auto-resolve combat, because the game is going to assess the strength of your army and the enemy army and kind of calculate how that fight would play out and just resolve it for you. So currently what we have is a battle result of close victory, so we win, and the number of casualties is low. So just show it off. Auto resolution, killed everything, we had some losses, we took some damage, but overall we won the fight, and we even got an item for it. We now capture the settlement, we can choose whatever we want to do. If we want to raise it, just destroy it, sack it for money, loot and occupy, or occupy. I'm just going to occupy here. And we have now expanded our empire by an additional settlement. Now we have 2 settlements from this 4 settlement province. So our next objectives could be to go and conquer Ubersreich, which is over here, and then from Ubersreich go and conquer Heilhart, which would basically finish up this this province over here. Again, we can build up our buildings. We have military buildings that allow us to recruit different types of units. We can recruit units, obviously. For example, assign skill points as we saw. So yeah, we can do a lot of different things in the game, and I think it's a great deal of fun. So this is not supposed to be a very in-depth going into detail on the mechanics of the game. If you guys want, I can do it as well. I would be very happy to talk about this game. But I'm going to mention something here that also sold me very, very much on this game. Which is, when I first played this game, I played the story campaign. So you can basically play the Lost God, which is the tutorial. Doesn't matter too much. You can play Realm of Chaos, which is like the story campaign of the game. It has its cool elements because, you know, it's story driven. It says right there. So it's story driven. So it makes for a good experience. But there are certain decisions on the campaign that I don't like too much. Or you can play Immortal Empires, which is basically just a sandbox campaign. So when I played my first Immortal Empires campaign, naturally, I played with dwarves because I love dwarves. This was my first faction, Thorgrim Grudgebearer. Karazakarak, awesome faction, awesome race, just superb, awesome. We start over here, we can also see the map, which is a huge map. And my first campaign took me, I don't know, it took me several days or maybe even several weeks to finish. And one thing that I'm going to show when we start here And this got changed, by the way, because the dwarves got an update, because this game has been continuously updated, which I also like a lot. They've been revamping mechanics, they've been adding new factions, new races, new lords, quite frequently actually, which is very, very cool. And the dwarves are actually different from when I played them first. But what I'm going to show now is in terms of what your faction does, okay? Just going to skip through this initial part here. So we get some explanation of how they play, right? We have like a wiki even explaining how they play, lore about the race and all that.
More green skins.
But essentially what I'm going to show here is something that's unique to the dwarves, right? So dwarves have a mechanic which they call grudges, right? Dwarves hold grudges, which is very thematic. They hold grudges against their enemies. And they even have something which I find very, very cool, which is a book. They have the Great Book of Grudges. They hold their grudges and they write them down. And Thorgrim even has the book right here. He has the grudge book right there on his little platform there. I just love the dwarves. Man, look at their settlement in the mountain. How can you not love dwarves? Man, it's okay. I'm gonna shut up about dwarves. They have their book, which even is like a little book over here, and you can see your Great Book of Grudges, and you know who you hold grudges against, different factions, and these are essentially different objectives for you in the game as well, right? And what you can do is you can work towards settling these grudges, and you're gonna get rewards for them. You can also confederate or take control of other lords based on how many grudges you settled. And you can even get unique units based on how well you did in your Age of Reckoning. Because you essentially have 15 turn sections where you work towards settling grudges. And the more grudges you settle, the better bonuses you get. Right? And that's an entire mechanic for that. You can see this army will give you 81 points of grudges. Conquering this settlement gives you 128. And as you look through the map, you're going to have different values for different places and different races. And that will kind of guide you and motivate you to go throughout the game in different ways. Not only that, you also have stuff like the High King Decrees. You have Oath Gold, which is a different type of currency. You have the Forge, where you can craft items. You can craft things to buff your armies and your units. And all of this is unique to the dwarves. However, when I finished my first campaign, what I thought was, okay, so I've played my campaign, I've spent like 100 turns here, whatever. I've got my objectives done, so I'm gonna try out a different race, right? But my expectation for a different race was that I was gonna be playing essentially the same game, but on a different part of the map and with different units, okay? Which, you know, just by itself is kind of motivation enough to play, because dwarf units are different from empire units and from demons of chaos and Nurgle and whatnot, obviously. But not only that, the entire mechanics for your campaign are different. So the dwarfs have grudges. The dwarfs want to expand in a way that can settle grudges. That's their main objective. If you play, for example, with a more chaos-oriented faction like the Beastmen, you kind of want to raise everything. You want to destroy everything. The same thing with the demons of Khorne. You want to kill everything. Skulls for the Skull Throne, blood for the Blood God, not all that. So the whole mechanic behind your faction is very different. So what I expected to be just the same experience but with different units turned out to be very different. So let's take an example, look at this lady here, Elspeth von Draken, which is also an addition from not too long ago. She has something called the Imperial Gunnery School, right? She has gunnery, infantry, cavalry, mortars, great cannons, land ships, steam tanks, rocket batteries and volley guns. You have different tiers to the gunnery school. You have ways to improve existing units. You have unique units. So all of this different currency in the form of schematics, the Amethyst Armory, you have the Gardens of Moor. All of this is unique to this lord. Not even this faction, this lord. So if I were to play with a different Empire lord, like I was before with Karl Franz, again, it's a different experience. So not only do you have a tremendous amount of choice on which factions you choose and which lords you play with, and consequently you have a whole bunch of different units as well, and you know, playing with different units is gonna give you a very different experience as well. Essentially, all of these are unique between them. No faction plays like another. They all have unique and different and interesting mechanics. And even within it, as we saw, they're also different. A brief example, looking at the greenskins. We have Grimgor Ironhide. This is a guy that's focused mainly on orc infantry, brute force, offensive power. If we look, for example, at Warzag, he uses a different type of unit that you cannot recruit by default, which are savage orcs. He's also a spellcaster lord. So his whole mechanic is a lot different. If you play with Skarsnik, which is a night goblin, you cannot even recruit orcs early on. Only after you capture Karakate Peaks, for example. So you're gonna have to rely on goblin units at the start of the game. Not only that, he also relies a lot on ambushing, which is another mechanic. So all of these things are unique. You have Grom the Paunch, which is a food mechanic because the guy's fat. So I cannot... It's hard to express how much I appreciate the level of content and replayability you have in this game. Because again, I was expecting kind of a similar approach to the game with different units, but it turned out to be a unique experience with all of them. I am not saying that every single one of these factions and lords is, you know, super up to date in terms of power level, and I'm not gonna say that they're all perfectly balanced and immensely fun. Different people are gonna like different things, but at least for me, the vast majority is very, very cool. Even in terms of combat in the battlefield, you have factions which are more offensive oriented, you have factions which are more defensive, which will also change your lineup, it will change your strategy. So just a lot of different things you can play with in this game, and honestly, I cannot get tired of it, and I just love this game. I just wish I could play it more. Let's couple that obviously with the fact that we're talking about the Warhammer universe, which is very appealing to me. And again, if you like fantasy, it's also a very good choice. But yeah. Also the map, by the way. I forgot that aspect, right? I talked about the map, but let me just tell you that even though you have a large map, it's not just large, okay? It's not just that you have a lot of places to go. It's that different areas are going to play very differently between them. Like this area here is very jungle, dense. I don't know the proper expression for this, but there's a lot of jungle area over here. This little donut here where the high elves live, there's a very maritime theme to it. Over here you have kind of like the frozen chaos lands, which are filled with demon lords and demon factions and dark elves. So all like this plays very differently from this section, which plays very different from this section and that section. everything plays very different. So everything is a very unique and different experience. So if you've played with Grimgore, the greenskins, you might think, oh, I've played with this guy, so I kind of already played with all of them. No, no. It will be a very big difference starting over here in these kind of lava-filled wastelands than it will be starting with Warzag here in this jungle and desert area, or with Skarsnik in the mountains surrounded by dwarves. It's gonna be a very different experience for all of them. So yeah, I think I have to shut up right now because I can keep talking about the game for a very long time, but my voice is kind of wearing thin as well. But yeah, this is just like a not so brief, I guess, video talking about Warhammer, Total War Warhammer 3 and my love for it. I will say, if you are kind of interested in this type of game, I think it's something that's very much worth trying out. I really, really do. Because once it clicks, it's going to be kind of like a game for life. There's also a bunch of other Total War games that I'm very much looking forward to trying out as well, because I really want to play them also. One thing to note, by the way, because it's not irrelevant, right? We see a lot of different factions here and a lot of different lords, but not all of this comes with the base game, okay? So one thing they did is, if you purchase Total War Warhammer 3, you get to play with the races and lords that game brings. Every single race and lord will be present in the game, but you can only play with the ones that come in the third game. I think it's like Grand Cathay, Tzeentch, I kind of forget at this point, but you don't have them all. Kislev, I believe. But how this works is, if you have Total War Warhammer 1, you also get all of the races from that game, and if you have the second game, you get all the races from that game as well. All existing DLC for the first game and second game, if you have those DLCs, you will also get them in the third game. To mention though, getting all DLCs is not cheap. The game and the DLCs are kind of frequently going on sale, at least on Steam. I see them on sale very often. I picked up most of what I have on sale in Steam. And I know that, for example, a friend of mine was able to purchase something that Steam doesn't sell, but he was able to find like a physical version of the game that basically had a Steam key, which contained all 3 games for a very reasonable price. So if in your area you have that ability, you can also consider doing that, which is going to be cheaper. And my suggestion, if you want to try out the game, I would say purchase Total War Warhammer 3 on sale. Don't get anything else. Try what the third game brings to you, and then, because like I said, every single race and lord will be in the game, even if you cannot play them. And then as you play, you're gonna start seeing if you like a certain faction or not, and if you do, or a certain lord, you can consider purchasing some DLC, or you can consider purchasing the previous games and whatnot, and kind of tailor your experience to your personal style. That's it for this video, my friends. It's just kind of like a free-form video talking about the game, introducing the game and sharing my thoughts on it. I really do like this game a lot. I will say, if you like this content and you want to see some more Total War content, leave a comment. I would very happily talk about, I don't know, like my favorite races or factions, or which DLCs I would suggest people getting for their playstyle. You know, there's a lot of discussion that can be had over this game, so leave a comment in case you guys want to see some more of this and what you would like to see, and I will consider making some more videos of this style. With that said, my friends, as always, thank you so much for being here on the channel watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Questions, suggestions, anything at all, leave a comment below. If you enjoy this type of content, consider subscribing to the channel. There's many more videos coming out soon. It is also a free and easy way to support the channel. I hope to see you all in some other video, and until then, stay safe everyone.